SuperTalk Mississippi 97.3. This is the Pine Belt Talks Back. Micheal Mergens with you on this Thursday morning. 264-8910 is our phone number. And real quick, morning,
Good
Angela.
morning.
Now, it's Social Security Disability.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. Of course, if you have a question for Angela, 264-8910. Now, previously, we talked about workman's comp and how a person can have a Social Security Disability claim and a workman's comp claim.
That's correct.
What about personal injury or a car accident or an offshore claim? Can those people also have Social Security Disability claims?
Absolutely, they can.
Okay.
And usually, if the illness, injury, limitations from those go on long enough, they should file.
Oh, okay.
They should file. A lot of those people have paid in long enough. They're certainly eligible, or likely, eligible.
Right.
And if they go ahead and file, if they think they're not going to be able to work for 365 days, even if they have a suspicion of that, they should go ahead and file and secure that date.
Okay.
Now, there's little nuances that are different. Personal injury, really, there's no offset for those attorneys that are doing the PI work, and we do, of course, the Social Security Disability work. There's not a lot of conflict there. They do their thing, we do our thing, and it's two different tracks. It's two different cases.
Right.
Same with offshore. Those attorneys handle those matters, and we handle the Social Security Disability matters. Two different tracks.
Okay.
There's no offset. They don't really pay much attention to each other. Not a whole lot of overlap, except for the injury, illness, limitations from those.
Right.
Those things, of course, overlap. We talked about workers' comp before, and just kind of a reminder on that, there is some overlap for workers' comp. Not in an exclusive way. In other words, you can draw workers' comp and Social Security Disability. And again, I would advise you to go file. If you are pushing that year or you think you're pushing that year, go file.
Right.
Because if you don't get that date secured, you're never going to have that date secured. You're always going to be behind the eight ball there.
Right.
But now, as far as the workers' comp goes, as compared to Social Security, there's an offset. So you can't draw 100% of workers' comp and 100% of Social Security Disability. There's an offset.
Okay.
But it's still worthwhile
Right.
to do it, to file and deal with it.
Now, with that money, is there a set amount, or is it based on how much that you were making before, or how does that work?
You're talking about the benefit amount?
Yeah, the
from
benefit
Social
amount.
Security?
Yeah, with that. I mean, how does that?
Well, if the person is to draw disability insurance, which again is based on earnings,
Right.
we've talked about that before, that is based on how much they've earned over time.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, that's a crazy formula. All their formulas are crazy and usually about a line long, and you have to sit down with a couple of pads and a couple of calculators to
Right.
figure them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely based on what you've paid. Not really what you've paid in so much as what you've earned.
Okay.
Which are relative. They are related.
Right.
But then the SSI amount, that is $698 now. That's the current year's amount.
Oh, okay.
Minus whatever they take off from any income that you might have or income in your household.
Okay, so they look at,
Because
it's
remember,
not necessarily you if you're married. Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
there's a difference for the SSI because it's needs-based.
Okay.
You have to be disabled, but you also have to fit the range for the needs-based analysis.
Oh, okay.
In other words, you can't make $1 million and draw SSI.
Right.
Not even close, actually.
Yeah. Of course, if you're making $1 million, I don't know why you would bother anyway.
Really don't need it. But yeah, they reduce your SSI benefit for people providing you shelter, providing your clothing, providing your food. So even if you live with someone and you're not married to them, but they're providing these things for you, they subtract. Now, it's not a dollar for dollar subtraction.
Right.
And it usually doesn't make your benefit go away completely. So it's still worthwhile to have it. And plus, of course, the Medicaid that comes with it is certainly worthwhile to have.
Yeah.
But with disability insurance, you don't have that concern. You can win the lottery.
Oh, really?
And it doesn't affect your benefit because it's your money.
Right. That's a good point.
Totally different perspective.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people who try to, I guess, weed the system in that respect and try not to let them know that there's somebody else. It's like, just be quiet. Don't tell them that you live with me. Don't tell them that you're helping me out. But there must be some diligence in there, because just the process of trying to go through this in the first place, I can imagine that there is probably a white van parked in front of your house. Is that how they're making sure they've got the ear cups and everything, listening in and make sure?
Funny. They have facility to do that, and I don't know about the white van.
Yeah, black van maybe.
Maybe a black van.
Okay.
I'm not real sure about that, but yeah, they do. Actually, they have a fraud prevention program. Excuse me, and they implement it when necessary.
Wow.
There are a lot of states that are more active than others. So some states you can really watch out for that, and some states not so much.
Right.
But they pretty much know that you're living somewhere and that you're eating somehow. And so there are certain deductions they're probably going to take anyway, even if you don't own up to some things. Now, if you don't own up to resources, income, stuff that you have, and they find out you're going to have an overpayment, you're really going to be in a mess. So I don't advocate that at all.
Right.
You just need to own it, do it. If you can pre-plan, fine, but don't misrepresent.
Right. No, that makes sense. And that's another thing is I know that there are people out there that think that they can cheat the system, and just keep in mind that if you're listening and you've thought about maybe attempting that, it's especially in this line. There's probably things that you can do in other parts of the government. Not that I'm condoning that, but I'm sure that if someone really wanted to sit down and look at every single line, they could find some loopholes. But it just seems when it comes to Social Security disability, they've covered all the bases. There is no way that you can really cheat them.
It's extremely difficult. There are some misrepresentations that can be made, and people can draw things that they're not entitled to draw, not on their earnings,
right?
But because of a disability that may or may not be that bad, depending on what kind of records you come up with and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But usually you'll get found out. Somebody is going to call it in. Somebody down the road that didn't get the benefits that they asked for, knows that you're getting benefits and really don't deserve them.
Yeah.
They're going to call.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And it may not be today. Might be next year.
But sometime.
But it's they get those
you.
calls all the time. So it's not. And I'm not saying you need to be paranoid. Just be truthful.
Yeah. If you're truthful, you don't have to be paranoid.
Exactly.
That's how it works. Now, we've also talked about when you're talking to your doctor, if you have ailments, let them know. Complain about it. Don't have this attitude of, I'm just going to tell them what they want to hear, which is what happens with me when I go to the doctor. I just say what I think they want to hear, as opposed to
you think they need to know.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, the other side of that is if you've been seeing your doctor for 5 or 10 years or even 2 or 3, and they really know you, you think they know. And they do know, but if you're not complaining about it today, it's not today's problem. And so they probably won't write it down.
Right, and that's the key. So is complaining to the doctor enough to support a claim for Social Security disability?
Complaining is crucial, and I don't really like to complain.
Right.
Most people don't like to complain, so that's probably...
It has a negative
Yeah, it does. I think you need to advise your doctor of where you are medically and not try to diagnose and whatnot, but tell them what's going on with you. If you're fatigued, if your medicine makes you so sleepy that you have to sleep 3 times a day, if you have to drag your leg because it doesn't function properly, if you can't feel your fingertips, if you have headaches regularly, if you have balance issues, there's all kinds of things that are just not, I broke my elbow.
Right.
Things that kind of go along with other things that often people don't mention. And if they don't mention them, then they never get documented. But is complaining enough was the question. Complaining enough is probably not quite enough. You're going to have to deal with the doctor to get a diagnosis and to be treated, and those things will be tracked. They have to have objective evidence. For example, of course, I'm perfectly healthy. I don't have issues. I work hard. Rock on.
Right.
But let's just say maybe I got tired of work and didn't really feel like it. Think I'm going to try to scoot over there and get me some disability, move on.
Yeah.
I've had these headaches. I'm having these headaches, and I really don't tell anybody about them, but I go to the judge and say, I really have these headaches, and I have them, a couple of days a week, every week. I can't handle light. I can't handle noise. I've got to get in the bed and put an ice pack on my head. And some people really do have headaches that are that bad. So I'm not trying to slight that. I know that those are significant.
It's just they're waiting to tell. They're telling the judge. They're waiting till that moment. And why is that?
I think a lot of people think I can't be fixed, therefore there's no point in going to the doctor. We've tried this. We've been dealing with this for years potentially, and they still haven't fixed me. Why spend the money?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And that does not play well. Because if you just tell the judge when you get there, or you've mentioned it 3 years ago and you never talked about it again, and you get to the judge and go, yeah, but this is still a problem, they're really going to have a hard time with that. They're going to have a hard time believing that that's still a significant problem for you, and the rules require objective evidence. My telling you is not objective. That's
Right.
subjective. That's something coming from me. That's not something coming from somebody else.
Yeah.
And so complaining is important, or at least advising your doctor where you are and telling them about your circumstance and all the things that are going on with you. That is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll work from there and make the diagnosis and provide the treatment
Right.
and whatnot. That's what gets you there.
Okay, because the judge isn't a doctor, even though they've probably heard every single ailment
Exactly.
known to man, but they don't know. They're not the one that's out there to diagnose you. They need basically paperwork and evidence,
Exactly.
just like any case. They need the evidence
They
to show.
have to have the evidence to support the claim.
Okay, well, that makes sense. So can someone, once they get Social Security benefits, can they get them forever? Is there a cutoff?
Maybe, maybe not.
Okay. Two-sided.
Yeah, that's everything with Social Security pretty much has these gray areas. But as far as how long you can draw, if the judge finds you disabled after your hearing or whenever, and they say, you know what, you began to be disabled at this date and you ended your disability on this date, then no, you won't draw benefits past whatever ending date they've provided.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be what they call a closed period of time. You draw your benefits from that period of time and you're done.
Right.
If you need them in the future, you file again.
Okay.
Okay, so in that instance, no. If you are granted disability based on something that's expected to be continuing, there are rules that require review. In
Okay.
other words, they say that every 3 years you're to be reviewed. Your case is to be reviewed. Sometimes judges will say, you know what, if she gets this surgery and she uses 8-10 months to get recovered from it
Yeah.
and ready to go back to work, then maybe she should be really reviewed in a year or a year and a half.
Right.
And they can put that in the order. Now, whether Social Security does it's another thing, but they can recommend an earlier review. And what happens in those reviews, whether they're recommended at an earlier time frame or they're done on the 3 years, or as generally happens, and Social Security does them later than 3 years, they will send you a letter and say, hello, we're checking in on you. Let me know, what doctors you've seen, what troubles you've had, what hospitals you've been admitted to, what medicines you're taking.
Right.
And they get this whole information, and then they check it out. And if the records still show that those problems are still there to a disabling level, you're done. You don't have to, they may do another review on you down the road.
Right.
But for that instance, that's all there is.
So basically, you need the due diligence that you did in trying to get the benefits and going to the doctor, getting all the records, making sure you're complaining. That doesn't stop. Once you get the benefits, you need to keep doing that.
That's right, especially if you're younger. Those younger people are more apt to get reviewed than, of course, older people are.
Right.
Because they're approaching that retirement age and they're trying to make sure that only the people who are deserving receive disability. So they're going to go and look at the younger people faster.
Right.
Generally speaking. There's one other instance that that may cause you to be cut off, if you will. If you're drawing SSI, remember that's needs-based.
Yes.
And so you have to be disabled, and then you have to be within the needs-based range of income and resources.
Right.
They recheck those regularly. So they're going to check your financial review regularly. And if you're over for a particular month, then you don't draw benefits that month.
Okay.
So that can affect how long you draw benefits. If you go back to work, obviously that's going to have an effect, and that's going to ultimately cause you to get off the benefits, which is good because you're likely going to make more money working anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
But if your husband or your wife goes back to work or gets a different job and they're making more money, that can affect your resources and keep you from drawing continuing benefits. So that can make a huge difference.
I gotcha.
So it's not necessarily forever. There are some people that do draw it for a very long time, and there are some people that should draw it for a very long time,
Right.
depending on what their medical problems are.
And that's a good point. You're really not getting a lot of money, other than people who are trying to, I guess, cheat the system, as it were. They might have this idea that, well, I don't want to work, so that's why I'm going to go for these benefits. I'm going to fake all these illnesses and try to get them. But it actually would probably benefit you better if you were working, because the
You're
money
gonna
would
make
be
more
much better.
money.
And I don't think most people realize that, unless there's this mentality of, well, it's money. And
Well, some money's better than no money.
Yeah.
I would have to agree with that. But as far as just the amount you're going to get per month, you're not going to get rich off of it. I mean, most people who file for disability really need it.
yeah.
Not only are they disabled and unable to work, but financially they're probably in a mess.
Well, that's just like unemployment, too. That amount is not probably anywhere near what you were making before, which is a catalyst for you to look for a job. It's
Yes.
like, okay, this will hopefully cover your bills, but it's also
We're going to
not
inspire you to move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. So how can a person find out rather quickly if they're insured and eligible for Social Security disability insurance benefits, not Social Security?
Supplemental security income would be different. Yeah, you wouldn't need to know for that.
Right.
If you're insured, remember we talked about that before. That means I've worked long enough and paid into the system long enough, and therefore I'm eligible for these heightened disability insurance benefits.
Right.
And so if you're curious about that and you're not real sure, a rough rule of thumb is if you've worked 5 of the last 10 years, you probably are. No guarantee, because if it's sporadic work, that formula doesn't work.
Okay.
So if it's consistent work 5 of the last 10 years, then you're probably eligible. However, if you just really have a question mark, you can go online to SSA.gov and order your earnings record. And they'll send you a printout by year of what you've earned, and they'll tell you what your cutoff is.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So it's really easy.
Okay.
It may take them, may take you days or weeks to get it, returned to you, but it's easy to request, and it's not complicated to deal with.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
Might settle your mind a little bit.
Right. Okay. So what if a person wins disability benefits, but they're unable to handle the money?
That happens more often than you think.
Really?
Yes. Most people don't own it out in public if they can't read or can't write or don't do money well.
Mm-hmm.
That's not generally something they advertise.
Right.
And so just speaking with someone on the street, you may not even pick up the fact that they can't do those things. Or maybe there's some mental deficiency there that makes them go spend money wildly, and then not have rent money or whatever. There's all kind of reasons why a person might not be able to handle their own funds.
Okay.
There's a system set up through Social Security, and you can have a representative payee. That person gets the money for you, and they're responsible for that money for you.
Almost like a guardian.
Kind of.
Okay.
It's just a different system, so it's called something different, and the legality's a little different. It's a little easier to be a representative payee through Social Security's a little form you have to fill out, not a big deal.
Okay.
But they do want you to report every year, and not just want you to. You have to. It's mandated. They send you a form and say, okay, so tell me how you spent this money. And it has to add up.
Yeah.
And if you're not spending the money correctly for the person, then they can change the representative payee or do something different.
Which makes sense. I'm sure a lot of people out there just with their regular jobs don't manage their money extremely well, and
same goes.
It's the exact same goes. And it's probably a bigger issue, especially since now it's the government that's they keep a close eye on you no matter what, but an even closer eye with it. So that diligence of keeping records and everything, that's...
Yeah, you need to do that just to cover your own self. If you're the representative payee for somebody and you get that money and you have to deal with that money, just keep it in a separate checking account, keep up with those. Just throw them in a shoebox if nothing else.
Right.
Just put them in a little envelope by month, throw them in the shoebox. When you get your little reporting thing, you've got everything in the shoebox, and you're ready to go.
And when you have clients, do you stress that with them to make sure?
We do. We don't want anybody to mess over the money.
Right.
And usually if there's a representative payee that's been appointed for a person, that person needs them.
Right.
They're not appointed just for fun.
Yeah.
That person really needs somebody over their money in order for them to be able to have just basic substance things. Just food, clothing, a way to get to the doctor, that kind of thing. And it's very, very important for their well-being.
Yeah.
That money be handled well.
No, that makes sense.
Not to mention that it's criminal otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
And Social Security is not scared to pursue that if they need to.
Right. And that's one of the things that I guess I'm kind of cynical about when it comes to that, because most people have this idea that everyone's trying to cheat the system and that maybe the government doesn't pay that close attention to it. And even though they say, well, you can take up to 2 years, you can get denied your first time, people are still going to try to do it. But it seems like they've got it set up pretty good. Of course, they've been doing this for quite a few years.
Quite a number of years.
So it is definitely one of the...
There are a lot of systems that are set up through Social Security at different levels for different things to kind of be a watchdog. You know? And they... Again, sometimes they pursue that more diligently than they do other times. And I've had so many people say, well, but my neighbor, and you're going to get that a lot because, but the truth of the matter is maybe your neighbor really is disabled. Maybe they're so mental that they don't function, but you don't see that. Some people can hold it together, even if they're very, very mentally ill. They can hold it together for a few minutes to say hi at the mailbox, and so they don't walk funny or look funny or whatever.
They're just like everybody else.
And you just don't clue that there's really something going on there. So a lot of people have misconceptions, I think.
So definitely do your research when considering that. So, Angela, what is the best way for people to reach you if they do have questions?
601-545-3127. You just need information about us. Always check us on the web, www.davismorrislawfirm.com. And we're on Facebook, and we post a couple times a week and just informational stuff, so check us out.
And you'll be back on here next Thursday at 9 a.m. So if anyone has any questions you want to bring to the air, that'll be your opportunity. Angela, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. We'll see you next week. And coming up, Samantha Kinnard and Bethany DeFata, members of the 2012 class of Leadership Pine Belt, are going to be in next. We'll be back with the Pine Belt Talks back on SuperTalk Mississippi 97.3.